Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org, for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Rian McMurtry. We'll be discussing his book, Between Light and Dark. Now, guys, keep in mind, this is a series, the first in a 4-part series, and we'll quickly go into the other 3 books at the end of the interview. But of course, the main focus, the anchor of today, is going to be Between Light and Dark, all of which are available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble for purchase. And I will say, Rian was brought to People of Distinction today by some of the best movers in the business. Author, Reputation Press Publishing. If you have a book that you'd like moved, well, you got to move it through ARP. You can find them at authorreputationpress.com. And guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Rian here on the line with us today, because his book, and really his series of books that we're going to be discussing, Between Light and Dark. First and foremost, guys, listen, it's a fictitious story, okay? It's a fictional narrative, but what I love so much about the book is the underlying theme, or at least one of the underlying themes that is so universal that we can all relate to, is it really stresses the importance of communication, right? And really not making assumptions. And listen, isn't that something we can all get behind? And I'm so glad that we have Rian here on the line to discuss all the nuances in his book, because listen, he's the expert on the matter. He's going to be able to articulate all of the nuances in his book much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's bring him here on the line with us. Rian, first and foremost, thank you so much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're very much looking forward to this. Now, Rian, before we jump into the book itself, let's hold off slightly. Let's build that temptation just a little bit more. Tell our listening audience a little bit more about yourself.
I'm middle-aged. I based the setting of the book on the area where I grew up. I have a bachelor's in zoology and a lawyer's degree. I always liked creative writing, so I decided to write the book.
There you go. Wonderful. Rian, thank you so much for sharing. Now let's jump right in. Between Light and Dark. Tell us about your book.
Okay. The main character is Angela Fujiwara. She is a high school freshman, and she has an accident very early on. And over the course of the next year, she discovers that there is magic in the world. And the magic is affecting her directly, and a bunch of her classmates are actually practitioners of the magic. So she's learning from them, and as the series goes on, she learns magic herself, and then teaches, then helps save the world.
There you have it. So it's a sci-fi novel, correct?
Urban fantasy, but there are sci-fi elements.
Fantastic. I mean, it's listen, something taken directly out of a Hollywood film. I mean, it's something that we can all relate to. We've seen it in pop culture. It is a very catchy theme for sure.
I would greatly appreciate it becoming a Hollywood film.
Well, hopefully we can help assist in that regard. Right. Thank you so much for explaining. Now let's go into the title, Between Light and Dark. Now, instantly it grabs your attention. It really sucks the audience in. Now talk to us. A, how did you develop that particular title creatively? And B, why did you choose that title to be the representation for your book?
Well, Angela is sort of standing between different sorts of influences, between being a very good person, being a little more dark and edgy. And it seemed like a good title. I sort of was going by feel more than anything else.
Wonderful. Now, you know what I love is looking over the series of books. I mean, there's definitely a theme that is reoccurring when it comes to at least the title, right? I mean, the first book in the series, as we're discussing, is Between Light and Dark. And then the next book in the series is A Light in the Darkness, followed by Love in the Darkness, and then Light from Darkness. So there's definitely a common theme that continues to be represented in all four of the titles. Now, we don't, of course, want to go into too much detail. What was the thought process behind those connections in the title?
Well, the first one, Angela, is just sort of standing there. She's not learning magic. Things are happening to her. Things are happening around her. In the second one, she is the light in the darkness. She's learning the magic herself. In the third one, when she's teaching magic, the person she's teaching is a friend of hers who's a school matchmaker. So that was the person I was referencing with Love. And the end is the success of a group of friends in saving the world.
Fantastic. So you absolutely follow this journey and this arc from the first series of book when we get acquainted with this main character and, you know, the other characters associated alongside her, and we see that arc as we go into the culmination of Light from Darkness. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. You know, Ryan, let's go into inspiration. Now, inspiration, of course, as we've discussed, can take many forms. Okay, so it's a multi-part question. So let's start off first and foremost. What inspired you to write this particular book, Between Light and Dark?
Part of it was the National Novel Writing competition every November. I wanted to write something, and these particular characters have an influence on my Advanced Dungeons and Dragons campaign, so I used them, and I was sort of inspired by, with their ultimate epilogue, I was inspired by a novel of David Brin's called Earth, about accidentally creating a new universe. And so I had them deliberately do that.
Mm-hmm.
It was about creating a universe and going to it is what they were planning to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, the second part to that question, Ryan, listen, we know about your background, and I mean, you come from a background of practicing law. So what inspired you? Now, I know you briefly talked about how you always were interested in creative writing, but obviously that wasn't what you initially selected for your career path. So what transitioned and really inspired you to embark upon a creative journey of this magnitude and become a writer and write the 4 books in the series?
Well, I'm diabetic and I stepped on something. And that led to an infection of the bone of my foot. So I was laid up for a while with an amputation. And I decided that I would rather be writing than practicing law.
You know, thank you so much for sharing. You know, when you said it, it was almost comical because it was just very direct. And I'm really sorry, of course, to hear about the amputation and about the circumstances, but it sparked a creative and wonderful journey to embark and, you know, write these series of books. So we're definitely glad of the outcome and what developed from it. So thank you so much for that. Guys, again, here on the line with Rian McMurtry, we're discussing his series of books. The first one entitled Between Light and Dark, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Now, Ryan, this is clearly a book dedicated to what is perceived to be young adults. I mean, the characters in the book, high school students embarking upon their young adult lives. Now, why was it important to you to write, out of all the genres and age groups that you could have written about, was there any particular significance to writing about high school students?
Not particularly. Part of it was being able to do the structure of year by year. of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. In that case, I was sort of inspired by the way J.K. Rowling structured Harry Potter.
Absolutely. And then the next question is, why did you feel that this was a book that needed to be written and put out for the public? I mean, we know why it was an interest for you to be writing during a tough time in your life, and you wanted to switch from practicing law into creative writing. But why didn't it just stop there? I mean, why wasn't it something that you just wrote for yourself and for your own entertainment, but something you wanted to take a step further and put out for the public to be able to benefit and partake in as well?
A lot of it was why not? Create some sort of like for yourself that the public would know, and pretty much that's it. It was see what I could do, see if I could achieve that ambition.
There you have it. Fantastic. You know, following up off of that, Ryan, a personal question, really that's something that I'm really curious about. What would you say, either in this particular book, Between Light and Dark, or in the series and in totality, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing those books? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon this journey?
Prior to embarking, I wasn't really thinking about engaging all that much between myself and a character. And as I went along, I found myself putting a lot of myself into a particular character, or at least in terms of attitude.
There you have it. Well, you know, what I love, I always find the art that I generally gravitate towards the most is the art that reflects real life. And I think it lends a lot of credence to you as a writer to be able to embark upon a journey and really find yourself within that and showcase it through your characters. I think that that's a wonderful and very relatable thing that you've been able to conduct within your art. So wonderful, wonderful. No, you know, Ryan, next question that I'd love to ask is, you know, what are you hoping to see people do with your book? Now, obviously, it's a fictional narrative, right? People don't really have magical powers, but it is based upon a high school setting, and it is based upon, you know, these teenagers embarking upon, you know, again, through the culmination of all 4 books, there is a journey that each book entails. It embarks upon that way. Did you create this book solely for entertainment value, or is there something hidden underneath that maybe teenagers can relate to and almost view as an education to be learned?
Well, the cast of characters is very diverse, and I set that up as they'd met in kindergarten, nursery school, and first grade, so they'd stayed friends and worked together to solve problems. And, you know, the differences aren't really all that much when you get to know each other. I was sort of raised on Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers, so I brought aesthetics to the characters.
Wonderful. Ryan, listen, this has all been fantastic thus far. Thank you very much for all the information that you've been able to relay. Last question as we tie up this fantastic interview. Listen, being an artist myself, I love having this platform to be able to pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists that are out there. Now, listen, you've been through the gauntlet, you know, for lack of a better term, of writing a book and also publishing it. And you've done it 4 times with the series of books. What would you say, what advice would you give a new writer, someone just starting out?
Be very careful about choosing a publisher. Very careful about choosing how to do things. If you want to do things on the cheap, publish online.
You know, great advice, and really just words of caution, right? I mean, it's one thing to be able to write your story. It's another thing entirely to be able to share your story, you know, and I think you really hit on something of great value and of great importance is, listen, guys, do your research, right? Make sure you have really crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, you know, to use a cliche. but you really want to make sure that it's a partnership, right? It's almost like a marriage, depending on who you go with and which publishing company you choose to work with. You want to make sure that the people you're going to be investing your money into are willing to invest their time properly in you. And I think that is a great, great piece of advice. Guys, listen, what more can be said? Okay? You know what you got to do. Great stories to embark upon in this time. Let's call a spade, right? We understand that this situation that we all find ourselves stuck in with this COVID situation, listen, we're all on lockdown. We're all spending a lot more time at home than we're generally accustomed to. But just because we can't leave the confines of our home physically doesn't mean that we can't leave the confines of our home mentally and spiritually. And embarking upon this journey that Rian has put forth will help you do just that. A great book for anybody involved, but really an even better gift to give to someone else. So you know what you got to do. Head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pick up your copy of Between Light and Dark, and while you're at it, pick up the 3 books also in this series: A Light in the Darkness, Love in the Darkness, and Light from Darkness, all of which, again, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble by Rian McMurtry. Rian, this has been an absolute pleasure, such a delight. Thank you so much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thanks for having me.